How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 1 of What If Deku Had Sans Powers. And now, let's begin. Izuku would be born to his mother, Inko, and would end up having a very happy life. He was all bubbly and jittery and very overall happy, as he had tons of friends because they all loved his personality, and he was easy to be friends with. However, this would all take a sudden turn when Izuku turned to the age of 4. He would hop out of his bed, rushing to his mother's room, knocking on the door very rapidly. Mom, wake up! It's the time! It's time that I go get to see what my quirk is! Izuku would yell, jumping in the air. His mother would drowsily open up the door before telling Izuku that the doctor's office doesn't open for another 2 hours. He needs to go back to sleep. She can't deal with him waking her up this early all the time. Izuku would sigh before heading back to his room in a sort of walk of shame, having to sit in his bed and room, waiting for just the hours to slowly pass by, as this would end up being the longest 2 hours of his life. As Izuku would be sitting there waiting, his mother would finally walk into the room. Come on, Izuku, let's go eat breakfast, and then we can head out to the doctor's office. Izuku would rush over to his mother, as they would then walk down the stairs to the kitchen, where she had prepared a nice breakfast for him and herself. Once they were finished, they would hop in a car, as they would then speed off towards the doctor's office. As they would arrive, Inko would check Izuku in, as Izuku would be sitting bouncing in his chair, just way too excited to see what his quirk was going to be. As a couple minutes would end up passing, the doctor would end up coming out and would look down at a clipboard. Izuku Midoriya, as Izuku would hop up out of his seat before skipping off to follow the doctor. This was going to be the happiest day of Izuku's life. This is where he was going to get the most amazing quirk of his entire life, and he was going to become the hero that he's always dreamed to be. However, this wasn't the case. The doctor would take a couple of tests before sending Izuku out to a room where his mother would pick him up, taking him to a private area. As the doctor would walk in, looking back down at a clipboard, as he would then sigh deeply. I'm sorry, Midoriyas. It appears that Izuku here doesn't have a quirk. I know this may be a lot to take in, so I'll let you all by yourselves for a couple moments. The doctor would step out, as he would end up hearing the dropping of Izuku's All Might action figure, as it had broken, the head popping off of the socket, as Izuku, staring down at the broken figure, would end up just staring at it completely in a daze. All his dreams had just flooded right out of his ear in a moment. All just them, as the words of the doctor came flooding in, as his dreams came flooding out. Izuku standing there now, holding the broken bits of his action figure, as he would just look up at his mother, shakily holding the 2 broken pieces in his hand. I can still become a hero, right, Mom? Izuku would say, as Inko would stare down at Izuku, not knowing what to say. I don't know, Izuku. That's for you to decide. Izuku would nod his head, as he would try to make himself better, jumping up in the air, yelling, I'm still gonna become a hero, as tears would then slowly fall down out of Izuku's small child eyes. As the doctor would then come back in, as he would tell Inko that she can find all of the lab results, all of that stuff, just online after they log into their account and all of that. I hope you all have a good day, and I hope this doesn't make it any worse. The doctor would say, remorseful about all of the stuff that he had said to them. Inko would nod her head before grabbing Izuku and taking him out of the doctor's office, taking him back home. Izuku would walk into their house, as he would just walk aimlessly around the house as if not knowing what to do. All of the things that he had wanted to do and become, his dreams were gone, shattered into a billion different pieces, all just by the words of a doctor. Izuku would just look down at his hand before clenching it. I'm still gonna become a hero. This isn't gonna stop me. Izuku would say. However, as the years passed and the bullying would grow and grow, his dreams had slowly faded out of his mind. He really just knew it wasn't possible. He had heard of stories about how quirkless people attempted to become heroes before their lives were completely destroyed by a single weak thug or villain. As Izuku had decided that it's best for him and his mom to just stop this dream entirely. As Izuku, by the age of 8, had undergone tons of bullying at his school. All of his friends that he once had were now gone, despising him, glaring and looking down at him as if he was just a piece of dirt or trash sitting in their way. This was especially the case with young Bakugo Katsuki, who would just kick around and bully Izuku menacingly, just completely not caring for Izuku's life at all, as he would punch and kick and use Izuku as a punching bag and a training dummy. It was truly disgusting what Bakugo was doing. However, Izuku would end up going out of school that day, being bruised and battered. He had just gotten a beating session outside at the playground while waiting for his mother to arrive in the car to pick him up to take him home. Izuku would see his mother pull up as he would rush past Bakugo, who was still standing in his way, hopping in his mother's car as she would then drive off, worried at Izuku about his injuries as he would brush them off, saying that he was fine. So Inko would continue on driving, still completely worried for her child's sake. Inko would end up swerving out of nowhere as a car would zoom past them, as they would see this another car would then slam head-on right into their car, as she had drifted into the other lane to just dodge the car heading right at them. Izuku would be slammed into the seat in front of him, launched out of the car through the window, as his face would then grind against the pavement. Hello there, Izuku. I'm Sans. I've seen how your life is quite terrible, and I want to decide to fix that for you. And by doing that, I'm gonna give you a ton of powers. Get it? A skeleton? As Izuku would look blankly at Sans, who had just made a joke, as Izuku would kinda awkwardly laugh, like, yeah, as Sans would then explain further how he's seen how terrible Izuku's life has been and just wanted to turn it around. As Izuku would be staring blankly at Sans, not sure what to say. Well, I'll give you no time to accept or deny. You're gonna get these powers either way. So I'll see you the next time you're close to death, as Izuku would then wake up, now sitting in a very bright white room, as doctors would then come flooding in, yelling that he's awake, as his heartbeat had been very, very low but steady, as he had been sitting in a coma for the past week. All of that just small time he had been with Sans had been an entire week in the hospital. As Izuku would awake, he would end up just having hundreds of doctors, or not hundreds, but tons of doctors surround him, just asking him questions if he saw anything, if he dreamt of anything, as Izuku would shake his head, signifying that he had just been awoken as if he was sleeping and his dream had been forgotten. However, Izuku had remembered the brief time he had spent with Sans, as his mother would finally walk into the room wearing a having crutches, as she had broken one of her legs. She would come in, she would apologize so much to Izuku. I'm sorry, Izuku, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to almost kill you and I, as Izuku would shake his head, saying that it's no problem, Mom. You didn't mean it. It was the car before us that you swerved around's fault. As Izuku would then be released from the hospital days later after they made sure everything was fine with him. As Izuku would end up coming into school the next day, as the entire class, who had just not seen him for a week, had heard about what happened. Many of them were unsure if they should say anything to him, as Izuku would then sit down. Bakugo would then come up to Izuku as if trying to say something, but just nothing would come out of his mouth, as he would go back to sit down at his desk. Weeks would end up passing as the bullying would then continue, as Izuku had been hiding his hands up until that point. He had been somewhat scared to show everyone what his hands had become. After he had basically just been given Sans powers, his hands and most of his arms had completely turned to bone, as he would end up finally revealing this, as he would end up walking in with no gloves or anything, revealing his arm, as it had been the winter when the accident had ended up happening. So it was finally now spring, and Izuku couldn't be wearing long coats. However, he still decided to, as he had seen Sans wear, and decided to basically mimic the person that gave him the power that he now possessed. So Izuku would end up walking in wearing a big puffy winter coat as he would end up sitting down. Many of the class would notice his hands looked completely white and pale. They weren't really sure why, as many of them would end up crowding around Izuku's desk, as they would end up seeing the bone on Izuku's hand, some of them even touching Izuku's hand, wondering what it was. Bakugo would end up walking into the class to see everyone surrounding Izuku, as he would then yell at all of them for what they were doing around Izuku and why they were all saying, "Wow, that's really cool." And many of them were just wondering what Izuku had turned into, as he was wondering why Izuku was getting all of this praise. Bakugo would end up coming into the class, being like, "What are y'all doing? Why are you treating him like he's a god?" Or at least that's what he thought, as his ego was now in the way, wondering why someone was being praised more than he was. So he would end up walking in, slamming his hand down on Izuku's desk, burning it, as Izuku would then raise up his hand, as a bone would appear in it, as he would then knock Bakugo right on the head, as Bakugo would then fall over in pain, clenching his head, "What the heck was that, Deku?" As Izuku would look over at Bakugo, as he would just give him a look like, "Please don't do that again. It's my desk." As the entire class had seen Izuku summon a bone out of nowhere, Bakugo would just wonder, "How the heck did you do that? You don't have a cork. You're corkless." As many of the class had already thought, Izuku now has a cork. He must have gotten it in the accident, while Bakugo was now in denial, saying that he didn't have a cork and that he must just be insane. So Izuku would end up passing through all of the different grades, as Izuku would now be 15, sitting in the classroom as the teacher would then walk in. While class, it appears 2 of the students have decided to go into UA. The first one being Bakugo Katsuki. "Yeah, of course I'm going to UA. All of these other rejects could barely manage to come out being a sidekick. There's no chance anyone else could even get into that school." As the teacher would then list off Izuku's name as well. Many of the class would erupt into whispers. "Did you hear about what happened? After an accident, he somehow just got no power involving bones or something. Wow, that's kind of creepy. Do you think he's dead or something? I mean, he does kind of look like a skeleton." As the entire class would be talking about Izuku, as Bakugo would then approach Izuku once more after all the times he had approached him throughout the years. "Don't even think about coming to this exam, Izuku. After all, you're just going to humiliate yourself and make me look 1,000 times better than all of the rest of these rejects." As Izuku, summoning a bone once again, would hit Bakugo right on the head, as the entire crowd, or the class, would then erupt into laughter, as this wasn't the first time Izuku had done it, and every time Bakugo would go to try to bully someone, Izuku would just decide to do this. It was the one thing that made Bakugo even more pissed off, because here this corkless person in his eyes was showing him up, just knocking him on the head, making him look like a complete loser. So when the school was over, Izuku would be walking home, as he would end up being approached by Bakugo under a bridge. "This is it, Izuku." As Izuku had started to punish Bakugo about calling him Deku, seeing as it was a name that held bad ties, and he just didn't want to be called that. So he basically made Bakugo call him Izuku. However, Bakugo would correct himself, "Like I'm ever gonna use that name. Listen here, Deku. I'll count to 3 and you better be running. You need to stop acting like you're all this crap. So, here and now, why don't you face me and finally show me you're stronger?" As Izuku would then shrug, Well, it's not really my business, plus he's not really my friend. So, how about a coin toss? As Izuku would pull out a coin from his pocket, as the sludge villain was just wondering how this kid was really going to put his friend's life on the line up to a decision of fate from a coin. So Izuku would flip the coin before saying, "Heads, I save him, tails, I don't." As it would then land on tails, as Izuku would then wave goodbye to the sludge villain before walking away. Moments later, as Izuku would round the corner, All Might would jump out of nowhere. As the sludge villain would then see All Might would then attack the sludge villain. As there stood Bakugo coughing out the sludge that was still inside of him. As the sludge villain wasn't able to attack in just pure shock, Izuku had just completely decided not to save Bakugo by the fate of a coin toss, and that was kind of shocking towards the sludge villain, thinking that he was going to try to save him. So Bakugo sitting there would end up being seen by All Might, as All Might would then just capture up the sludge villain before jumping off, as Bakugo would then now be the Deku in the situation. Bakugo had idolized All Might for years, while Izuku had lost all of that just wondering of what All Might was, and just lost all of the want to meet All Might years ago. So Bakugo now wanting to become more like All Might, as he wanted to be the #1 hero, and the only person standing in his way was All Might. So Bakugo would now be standing on a building with All Might there, saying that was very irresponsible. However, Bakugo would then show All Might his quirk, wanting to be praised by All Might. Well, that's really a good quirk, you know. But it doesn't always take a quirk. You do need a great personality, sort of like mine. All Might would then laugh before jumping off, as Bakugo would be sitting there, as the word personality would linger in his head, as it would just echo and echo and echo. 10 months would end up passing, as Izuku had neglected to train at all, thinking that, what's the point? It's just another 50-50 shot, I make it or I don't. Kind of like that head-tails flip that I did to save Bakugo. But I really could care less if I make it or not. I'll just go out and do other things with my life. This isn't the end of the world if I don't make it. So I guess I'll treat it that way. I might as well give it a shot, seeing as I'm already halfway till death's door, as Izuku would be walking in to the UA campus. Many of the people had heard about a strange-looking skeleton boy who was thinking about taking the entrance exam. It was the talk of UA right now, as Izuku would be walking in. Many of the rumors had come from the class that Izuku was in prior, along with the school, just spreading rumors throughout the city about how there was this very strong person that had just decided to get a quirk one day. So it was quite confusing to the people surrounding Izuku. Izuku would end up walking into this massive auditorium, just looking around at the pure size of it. Wow, this place is pretty big, Izuku said, as he would then sit down, as the entirety of the crowd would just be whispering, wondering what was about to happen. Finally, a hero would walk out onto the stage before explaining what the written exam was, passing out the papers, as the entirety of the students there would end up taking it. Many of them would then leave after taking it, not wanting to take the hero exam. However, Izuku would stay seated, as he would finally just hear about what the hero exam was, how there was these different robots, and how they just had to destroy enough of them to get enough points to pass the exams. So Izuku just heard destroy robots and decided, hey, what the heck, this might be fun. So Izuku would be standing rather, stretching out his body, ready to start just destroying a ton of these robots. So, when the door would open, Izuku would then walk out, while the entirety of the people there would just be seeing Izuku walk out, thinking that he was an idiot, and it didn't even say go. However, they would then hear over the intercom that they need to follow him, as heroes never have to be told to go save someone. They would all rush off, right past Izuku, as he was just walking around looking for any robots to fight. He really just decided it wasn't use there was really no use for Izuku to just try to run around using up a ton of energy when he could be saving it for something else, probably when he's cooking something later for his mom, as Izuku had decided that he should probably start to learn how to cook because his mom had pretty much saved him from death that day when they crashed the car. Who knows how much worse it would have been if that speeding car had actually hit them, and a car that had already slowed down had hit them. So Izuku would end up just walking around as he would finally see a crowd of robots. It was a very huge crowd, as Izuku would then just point his hand out as a Gaster Blaster would then appear right above Izuku's shoulder, as it would then blast out a beam that would go twirling right towards the robots, completely decimating them. However, it was a crowd of one-pointers, only getting Izuku 15 points, nowhere near the amount to even get him in Class 1B. So Izuku would just be walking around again as he would then just feel the ground shake. Izuku would look up towards the sky as he would see a massive zero-pointer raining down, staring at Izuku and the people around him. Many of them would end up running away as Izuku would end up hearing a girl scream. Izuku would look up to see the robot was holding a girl in his hand as Izuku would think, it's kind of like King Kong. Izuku would just decide to rush over to the robot as he would teleport closer to it using a shortcut that he had found. Izuku would end up getting there as he would summon an entire circle of Gaster Blasters circling around him, as Izuku would then point his hand out, just signaling for them to fire right towards the zero-pointer, as they would all fire as the lasers, or whatever you can call it, would end up circling around each other, and they would end up forming a massive beam, going right towards the zero-pointer's head, as it would then land a direct hit, as the zero-pointer would then start to malfunction, as sparks would end up going flying everywhere. So there was now a massive gaping hole in the zero-pointer. The zero-pointer's hand would end up removing its grip from the girl's body, as it would then fall down. However, right before they reached the ground, they would suddenly stop, as Izuku was there holding them before they could reach any further. He had used another shortcut to get there to catch the girl. There stood a black-haired girl is now standing in front of him as Izuku had set her down. She would thank Izuku before walking off, just needing to defeat more robots, as this girl was Momo Yaoyorozu. Her family just decided that she had decided that she didn't want to go through the entire process of being a chosen student, rather wanting to prove herself that she was worthy of being a Class 1A student. However, her family had rigged it so no matter what type of points she got, she was going to be in Class 1A no matter what, as they were one of the most financial supporters of UA. So Izuku would end up walking off after hearing that the test had finished. Izuku would end up going home and cooking a nice meal for his mom, and she would then thank him. Izuku would then go up to his room before sleeping, waiting for the next day to arrive. 2 weeks would end up passing, as Izuku would get a letter in the mail, reading, "Dear Izuku, we have decided that you are worthy of being in Class 1A, as you have amassed a sum of over 100 points, making you the second best first year in the entire competition or exams. So, welcome to Class 1A and UA," as Izuku would smile down towards it, as he would just start laughing. "Well, it looks like I made it. Time to dedicate half my life to working through this now," as Izuku had pretty much decided, well, I guess I'll become a hero now. And that's where I'm gonna leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you all did enjoy part 1 of What If Deku had Sans powers. It was really fun to record this for you all today, and I hope you guys do enjoy this series. Part 2 should be out tomorrow, and then all of next week should be part 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe even a 7 or even an 8. So I hope you all do enjoy the series. Once again, I thank you all for watching once again, and Goodbye.